She jumps out from behind. I throw my laptop in the air. I close it. I slam it. I'm done. I have to walk out the room.
I just don't think I can deal with any more creepy children this year.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of We Need to Talk About. We're the TV team. I'm David.
And I'm Laura.
So we might not be able to gather around the water cooler and chat about our favourite shows like we used to, but we just had to connect and have a chat about Bly Manor because what a show. Let's start by talking a little bit about what our favourite episodes were. Mine was episode 5, which was when Tania Miller's character, the housekeeper, Mrs. Grouse, we learned a lot about how she was tucked away and all her memories, and there was some really creepy, disturbing reveals. So what about you, Laura? What was your favourite episode?
Well, firstly, that is such a good pick. I spent the majority of episode 5 being like, what is going on? And then by the end, I was like, yes, now we know what's going on a little bit more. And she was incredible in that episode as well. You spoke to her recently, didn't you? And she kind of, talked about filming it and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she was so lovely. Like, she's so warm and sweet on screen, and then she was in real life too. And she said so many little nice tidbits about clues about why not why we should have known earlier, but like kind of clues about Hannah's true fate, like the way she kept rubbing her neck, just casually. It's because it snapped. It's gone. She broke.
That's so dark and like terrifying. But I didn't notice that until obviously read your interview, and I was like, oh my god, how did I not see that? I did notice though that she didn't eat anything, and I kept turning round to my partner when we were watching it being like, she didn't eat anything.
Yeah, that was the one thing I was like, there's something not right about her, like there's something up with her character, but I was like, but she can't be dead, but then she is, but then it's so good. And I really love in that episode that we find out that she died just moments before we met her in episode 1. You know, she literally looks down at the well at her dead body, and then she looks up and she's like, oh hey Danny,
that is like the epitome of keep calm and carry on. Like, I'm going to look down at myself dead in a well, and then I'm going to be like, oh, hello to the new au pair, and like carry on showing you around the house. Like, you haven't just seen yourself dead.
Very professional, I gotta say. I was quite impressed. But yeah, what about you?
So to answer your question, my favourite episode was probably episode 8, I think it was, which was the historical throwback episode where they took you back in time, to the story of Bly Manor and why everything was happening the way that it was, and finally revealed who the creepy woman with no face in the lake was. Poor Viola. I ended up feeling a bit sorry for her in the end.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I love that episode too. Great pick. I really love, there's that one scene that's horrible but very relatable. You know, when she keeps waking up and she just walks around the room and she's like, I walk around, I open the door, I go to bed. Remember that on loop thing? I was like, that is 2020.
I mean, that is us right now in lockdown.
It's like The Simpsons, they're predicting the future. I was like, game changer.
It's true. And then as her face just slowly, she lost all of her features and stuff, which I thought, I mean, this was obviously the point of it, but it was a really gorgeous metaphor for how your memories kind of disintegrate over time and all of that stuff. It really spoke to the inner history student in me.
Nice. Because it was really beautiful, wasn't it? It was like visually beautiful, thematically, it was just gorgeous and heart-wrenching and
All things fade, all things, flesh, stone, even stars themselves. Time takes all things. 'Tis the way of the world. The past recedes, memories fade, and so true does the spirit.
When people first approached it, there's a lot of comparisons to Hill House, obviously, because Mike Flanagan, same creator, same director. So how do you think it matches up personally?
That's a really good question, because like you say, it's the anthology, isn't it? The Haunting anthology. So this was part 2 of that anthology. We're hoping there's going to be more. So the comparisons were always going to be there. For me, I kind of felt like I needed to separate the two, because I don't want to say Bly wasn't as good, but then Bly wasn't as good for me. Hill House, when I first watched it, absolutely blew me away. I just fell in love with all the characters. I fell in love with the story. I fell in love with the themes. The ghosts were terrifying. I will never be able to get that image of the bent neck lady out of my head.
That bit in the car, like
in the car.
I swear to God, get that scared. But she jumps out from behind. I throw my laptop in the air. I close it. I slam it. I'm done. I have to walk out the room. I turn around to my partner. I was like, tomorrow. Let's try again tomorrow.
I literally fell off my sofa with that jump scare. I mean, I'm a really jumpy, like, my partner calls me a guinea pig because I'm constantly like, I've got like quite bad nerves and I'm a very jumpy person. So that just ended me.
Traumatized.
Yeah. So I feel like Bly for me didn't quite hit those high notes and didn't quite have the same impression on me. But then when I kind of stopped trying to compare them and kind of separated them into two standalone series in my mind, that's when I really started to appreciate Bly Manor for what it actually is. And I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I just feel like I can't really compare the two.
But you're right, I think comparing them really does them both a disservice, actually, because like, yeah, the first few episodes I was the same. You can't help but naturally compare, especially when the first season is like such a game changer and such a phenomenal show. But they're not the same, and they're deliberately not the same. Because I read a lot of people criticizing Bly Manor, saying it's not scary enough, but that's not the point of the show. I know, and there were some scary bits, there were creepy bits and jump bits, you know, like in the episode you love with the hands come out of the way.
Children, David, that's what I always struggle with, because like, you're obviously a horror expert. You love the genre. You watch loads of like horror films and shows and stuff. Whereas I'm a little bit more of like a beginner. Like, I've only started getting into horror maybe in the last couple of years. Creepy children.
Creepy children.
Like, that's the one thing that just. That's the one thing that creeps me out so much, is creepy children. And just from the minute you meet Flora with her like perfectly splendid business, I was like, no, there's something wrong with that child.
She was not perfectly splendid. She was messed up.
This is a foyer, and it's perfectly splendid.
It's beautiful.
Come along.
And the dollhouse. Absolutely not. Never having a dollhouse. So I have rules, basically. In my house, I will never allow dollhouses,
Yeah,
dollhouses, or rocking chairs, because they're all haunted.
Ooh, rocking chairs, yeah, they're messed up.
In my house. So yeah, there was definitely creepy elements to it, I would say. It might not have had the absolute terrifying levels of bent neck lady, but there was definitely scary stuff going on.
Yeah, the kids were super creepy. They were so phenomenal as well. Like, you know, kid actors, it's quite hit and miss. Sometimes they're just like shocking, but they were perfectly splendid. They were great, you know, especially because they had to like balance being kids, but then being possessed freaky kids, but having to copy the adult who's possessed them. And I thought that was really, really impressive and horrible, and I never want to have children now. So that was my takeaway from Bly Manor.
I've always said to my partner, if we have kids and they start behaving like that, they're gone. They're out the house. Like, I'm not having that. You know, like when you watch all of these possessed children in these films, and you're like, no, if they come into me and tell me that they're meeting with their little friend at night time, I'll be like, right, you and your little friend are going to stay with grandma, because this is not happening in this house.
I'm worried that in like 10 years time, this video is going to be used as evidence against you in court.
What was also so scary about Bly, which kind of also happened in Hill House, was real life is scary and tragic and heartbreaking. Like, as they've said constantly throughout the show, if you love somebody, one of you is going to die eventually, and you're either going to be the one that dies or you're going to be the one left heartbroken. And that in itself is terrifying in a very real way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I love so much about Mike Flanagan's work generally. Like, and I think it's most obvious and beautifully done in Hill House and Bly Manor, because he's always very much about the characters first and then the scares are second. Because I think in horror, you need to care about the characters. If you don't give a shit about who they are and if they're going to die or not, then you're just not scared, because it's just funny, you know, if it's handled bad. So, and I think Mike Flanagan does such a phenomenal job of balancing those real life horrors and well-rounded characters. There's so many good characters. Who was your favourite character out of interest?
Oh, this is hard. I mean, I loved Danny, obviously.
Yeah, she was lovely. Even though she was very constantly nervous, she was like super tense. So I was like,
would you not be in that house? I mean, I just love how she was casually getting up and making a cup of tea in the middle of the night. And I'm like, you were just told not to leave your bedroom. What are you doing?
I really appreciate it. I was gonna say, I really appreciate how much they made fun of her not being able to make tea. Like, you know, normally it's always American shows taking the piss out of the British, and I was like, oh, this is fair, this is balanced. They can't make it. Sorry, that was a second.
That was great. But I just feel like if I arrived at this gothic, clearly haunted, creepy building where the previous version of me has died in mysterious circumstances, and then this creepy child tells me don't leave your bedroom at night time, I'm not then getting up at the silly o'clock in the morning to make a cup of tea. That's just not happening.
Right? Like, just make a little flask, have a little thermos, like hang out, be chill.
Or leave. I mean, that would also be a very valid choice to make.
But it was a pretty house though, like.
It was gorgeous.
It was gorgeous, although it wasn't real. I was shocked to discover that.
To say, you got the lowdown on the house, didn't you?
I spoke to the cinematographer. He James, he took over the second half. He was great, and so I was just chatting. I was like, "Oh, Bly Manor looks gorgeous. I'd love to see where it is." And he interrupted me. He was like, "What are you talking about? There is no Bly Manor." And I was like, "Game changer." So basically, because I figured, like, obviously they do a lot of green screen and stuff, but I thought maybe at least the exteriors, you know, like the garden and stuff. I thought that must be a place, surely, but. Apparently it was just all loads of shipping containers just stacked on top of each other, and they just painted it green and green screen the whole thing. And then they dug the lake as well, and they also even in the house, the upstairs and the downstairs are on completely different studios on the other side of Vancouver in Canada. So like,
wow.
They just so every time you see someone going upstairs, it's like they're teleporting across the city. It's nuts. So it must have been really hard for the actors because you're like, you might go up the stairs and then you carry on the scene, but to carry on that scene, it's like another day you're filming.
Right. Wow, that is impressive.
Yeah, because it was so confusing to watch, but I think it was also super confusing to shoot because you're like, am I dead? Am I tucked away? Where am I? Am I upstairs? Am I downstairs? Like, what the hell's going on? So
no, it's so true because you don't ever shoot in order either, do you? So it's just like piecing it all together and wow.
Yeah, but they did a phenomenal job. I was trying to think of a favourite character as well, and I mean, obviously Peter Quint, like for visual reasons, aesthetically. But,
I was about to say David. He is not a nice person. The actor that played Peter Quint was my favourite character in Hill House, as well as Theodora. Loved her in Hill House. But Peter Quint was not the one. Like, I don't know what Miss Jessel was doing. I really felt for her. I feel like she was very much consumed by this love that she and he shared, but it was very toxic. There was all sorts of red flags flying up everywhere. Yes. And then he went and did the ultimate thing and facilitated her death, and I just feel like that was incredibly tragic. But also I thought it was a really great, not metaphor, that's the wrong word, but it was a really great exploration in how you can get completely lost in a very unhealthy relationship like that.
Definitely.
So yeah, I thought that was quite powerful, but his character was definitely not one of my favourites.
Yeah, it was pretty grim. But yeah, you're right. I love how the show, even though it's supernatural, it kind of magnifies those real life things like you mentioned before, like a toxic relationship and how that can impact you. And I also appreciate that even though he's obviously like a monster and a terrible person, a terrible, beautiful person, he's still humanized. We still learn his backstory and there's still reasons for what he does, whether we agree or not. Like I thought it was really interesting when he was getting tucked away and he kept going back to his mother and he kept opening the door. Like that was really unsettling. And I really appreciate that they took the time to do that and not just paint him as a caricature monster, ghost, abuser.
I did kind of have a slight issue with that link being made and then not really properly explored, in the sense of that's such a complex conversation to have, isn't it? Like the cycle of abuse, and it also doesn't remove somebody's responsibility for the way that they then treat people when they're an adult.
Definitely.
And I feel like that is a very huge, complex conversation that maybe because not enough time was given to it, it was just kind of shown and then not really explored very much further. I don't know. I don't really know how I felt about that. I have very complex feelings about that.
That's a good
but
point.
I do agree with your point that it's good that they humanised him, because I think it's very important for people to realise how absolutely anybody can find themselves in an unhealthy, toxic relationship. You don't have to be an out-and-out villain or an absolute monster in order to treat somebody badly or be caught up in that. Because also Miss Jessel, she was a strong, opinionated, independent, career-driven woman. So she didn't fall into the tropes of what is often portrayed in television shows as being a victim, in the sense of she stood up for herself. She told him when he was overstepping. She got angry with him when he was being unreasonable, and yet she still was trapped in that love.
I would love to talk a bit about a healthier relationship that I loved. So with Owen and Hannah, and
I thought you were going to talk about Danny and Jamie.
Oh, two amazing relationships.
Two amazing relationships. Sorry, carry on with what.
No, it's fine. So Owen and Hannah, just adorable. First of all, like their plans to maybe go to Paris and open a restaurant, and just all their flirting with the cake batter puns. I was just in love with both of them. So it was like really even more tragic and sad when Owen realised Hannah's fate, and it makes me emotional just thinking about it. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm just emotional. I'm just sad.
It's a very emotional show for sure. No, I love that relationship too. And they were just they were exactly what each other needed. I felt like they were supportive of one another. They were just there for one another. They were a comfort for each other, I think.
Yeah, and that's especially true when because the memory Hannah kept going back to the most was that first day when she interviewed Owen, and they first had that formed that connection. I just thought that was really beautifully handled. I was just so impressed, and I really love how diverse the cast is as well. Like I think that's something Mike Flanagan does a great job of. Like very naturally incorporates just a range of ethnicities, incorporates different sexualities, and there's never any kind of form of tokenism that I would see. And it's just really beautiful. Yeah. So let's maybe switch to the other healthy, amazing couple, Danny and Jamie.
Yeah, so I interviewed Victoria Pedretti and obviously spoke to her about that relationship because it was such a central part of the show. And she had some really great things to say about how that relationship did not fall into any of the kind of toxic relationship tropes. So it wasn't that kind of, I'm going to fall head over heels in love with you from the first minute that I see you, and we're soulmates and we'll do anything for each other, which you could say the more extreme end of that is where Peter and Miss Jessel were. And then in tandem of that relationship, you had the Jamie and Danny relationship, which was just really organic and really more of a slow burn, but no less passionate and no less valid. I just thought it was absolutely gorgeous to kind of see that unfold as the show went on, and then to be able to see how they progressed outside of Bly, like after everything that had happened. And yeah, it makes me emotional as well.
I love, so the first few episodes, it's kind of hinted at, right? Like, and I've been burned before. There's so many shows where I think this wonderful queer romance has come in, and then it's just teasing you or baiting you. And but then, Jamie kept giving Danny a look, or Danny was like hovering a bit longer, and then for that to actually blossom and become something really beautiful was really special. I thought it was really refreshing to have a queer relationship be the healthy one, And, and then, like you say, juxtaposed with the toxic heterosexual relationship. I think for me, actually, maybe my most favourite scene out of the whole, or the most affecting scene for me was the lake when Jamie returns years later after Danny's left her, and she fears the worst, and then she dives in, and then there's that incredible shot of Danny at the bottom of the lake, now the lady of the lake, and Jamie is trying to swim to her, and she's screaming no. And
after the show just felt really sad. You know, when something just hangs over you and it takes you a little while to kind of shake that feeling, and you're still thinking about it the next morning when you wake up, and like that's kind of how that whole like finale sequence kind of left me feeling.
Which means shows a great show.
Yeah, that is the mark. Like I always say, the mark of a great TV show is something that can actually impact your emotions, whether that's laughter, sadness, fear, whatever emotion. If it can inspire an emotion in you and stick around with you a day or two later, like that is incredible, and that's what I love about television, and I definitely think that this did that. But then having spoken to Victoria and read some of your interviews as well, it's kind of made me realise that although it was incredibly sad, it was also really beautiful, and the message that it was trying to send about how we all only have the moment that we have right now, and to kind of latch onto that and be happy. And I just think that's such a lovely message, especially for 2020.
So those were our thoughts on Bly Manor, and we'd love to know what you think too. So please comment below, like, subscribe, do all that social stuff. And on behalf of the TV team at Digital Spy, have a spooky Halloween.